Anybody excited about going back to college? That ought to tell you your mind is kind of warped, huh? You know, yeah, I'm excited. Put me in school. Isn't it weird? I remember every summer I could hardly wait to get away from college. And then after 3 months on the book field, I can hardly wait to get back to college. So it's always fun to be in a business that has a cycle like that where you have variety in your year. And that's kind of what we've got going. What are some things you guys are excited about getting back to school? Anybody?
My classes.
Some of your classes, they're going to be kind of fun. It'll be fun to learn something.
Yeah.
How many of you are excited about actually sitting down and reading a book that does not begin with the scroll marked? Right? That'll be kind of sweet. What else?
Seeing how much we've changed.
Seeing how much you've changed, yeah.
Because I play tennis, I just want to see how much that's going to, all the experiences going to help me in the tennis sport, the mental part.
Okay, it will help you a lot because you've developed a lot of discipline, a lot of grit, a lot of drive, and you don't quit. You don't give up. So I think it'll be fantastic. I love it. What else are you guys looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to just like different animal opportunities that I have, like to volunteer with vets and stuff.
Okay, different opportunities to work in a field you love. All right, volunteer opportunities, which is good. Anybody excited about things like having a meal that you can consume sitting down?
Yeah.
You know, a conversation that does not end with the folks next door. That's going to be pretty sweet. How about college sports? Some of you fired up about that. I remember getting excited about really kind of unusual stuff. For example, I lived in dorms all the way through college, and right after my first summer, I got to my dorm room and I got right in. And it was so awesome. I stepped out and got right in again, you know. No second approach, nothing. And I turned to my roommates and I said, hey guys, I got right in. And they just, you know, whatever. I remember when it was time to buy my textbooks. I went to the Harvard Coop and I was working my way up to the head of the line and I put my hand on top of the books and I said, hey, you know what, to the cashier, I'm buying these. I am buying these books. And he looked at me like I was a crazy man. And I said, no, you don't understand it. I'm the purchaser. This equation has reversed for the first time in months, and I'm buying books, you know. So it was all kinds of strange stuff like that that I was fired up about. So we're going to make a little bit of a session here today that's intended to help you not only have the best grades you've ever had, but hopefully have the most fun and the most productive time. So we're going to start off with that most important word of all, and that word is why. So throw me out some reasons. Why do you think you should just blow it out, max out everything you can get from your education, from your grades, from your activities? Why is this an important thing to just be focused on? Who's got one? Go.
Time is limited, so never know.
Time is limited, so you want to use your time while you can. Agree with that. There was a guy in here yesterday who said the college years are a unique short period of time. Well, they're not necessarily short for everybody. I met a guy once and he said, I love my junior year. This is the best 4 years of my life. So sometimes that goes on. What are some other things? Why should you max out? Right here.
Knowledge is useless without application. We've just had a life-changing experience and learned so much about it, and it would be stupid of us to not apply it.
Okay, it'd be kind of dumb to not apply the lessons of the summer to doing a lot better, right? It's really, really easy to backslide, but you want to keep forward-going momentum as much as you can in your life, so I think that's awesome too. But why else? Why do well in college? There's some pretty logical reasons. These are really deep thinkers here that I'm hearing from, but there's some simple reasons. What's one?
Expensive.
It's expensive, man. You or somebody's shelling out a bunch of money, right? So you want to pull out as much gain as you can from that, which is key. Anything else?
You do well in college, and it helps you get a good job.
Do well in college is going to lead you better, right? Isn't that partly why you went to college anyway? Is to have more opportunities than if you hadn't, meet a good, cool group of people, really lock in some relationships. Well, the biggest single reason is to do with your future. There's an organization called NACE. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it. NACE stands for the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And it's actually a national association of colleges and of employers. Clever name, isn't it? And essentially the employers get together with the colleges and they say, give us graduates who have the following characteristics. And the colleges look at the list and they go, we can give you some of that, but not most of it. Let me show you what that list looks like. Here's the top 5. Number 1, communication skills, both verbal and written. Anybody get a little bit of a crash course in that over the last 3 months? Yeah, possibly so, and you learned it's not as easy as it looks. What's number 2 on the list? Motivation and initiative. Now, can you take a communication class in your college?
No.
Yeah, you probably can. There's communication majors, communication schools. But are there any classes called Initiative 201? You know, pretty hard to do that. Well, what if I could show you something super simple where you could get better at number 1 and better at number 2 with just a wave of the hand? Okay, so everybody, we're going to practice an exercise here. I'm going to say the word volunteer, and I want you to throw your hand up in the air. Ready? I'm looking for a volunteer. Okay, there we go. I'd like somebody to volunteer. Okay, the University of Tennessee volunteers. Okay, you're good. You're good. This Russian guy named Pavlov did the same thing with lab dogs. You guys are really good, you know, conditioned response. Do you ever have a professor in the middle of a lecture or at the end of a lecture say, okay, now, class, for the next class period, I'm looking for a volunteer. Good, and you guys just, without even thinking, just throw the hand up in the air. To prepare a verbal report and present it at the next class. And as your hand goes down, you go, why did I do that? But as you prepare the presentation, you practice it, and you deliver it to the class, you get way better at number 1, and you have just practiced what else? Number 2. So with a wave of the hand, you've gotten better at number 1 and number 2. That's pretty sweet. Teamwork, leadership. GPA is 5th on the list. So that doesn't mean it's unimportant. It's in the top 5. But there's lots of people in the world that think GPA is the most important thing for future success. It's important, but not the most important. 6, interpersonal. How about number 7? Anybody get a crash course in that this summer? Flexibility and adaptability. I remember my student manager did a great job preparing me for the summer, but when I got to the turf, it was nothing like I thought it was going to be. It was always different. And when I'd move turf, it was different. So you get great at flexibility and adaptability. Number 9 is such an important trait in life, honesty and integrity. This summer, you had a great opportunity to practice that. There was nobody watching your conduct. You could say whatever you wanted to say to people, and you had to learn how to practice integrity. The biggest lesson I got in integrity as an 18-year-old was on the book field. I was in San Antonio. Some of you are from that area. And I'd worked my way up to a really nice neighborhood, great houses, and the dad was writing me a check for the full amount of the books, and I didn't have a car, so I didn't have any books to give him. It was just a full down. And as he was about to hand me the check, his wife stopped him and said, honey, you're not going to give this kid money, are you? We don't even know him. He could take off with it. And the dad finished signing the check and handed it to me and looked me right in the eye and said, you know what, honey, if he runs off with our money, it's going to cost him a lot more over the course of his life than it will us. Zing. You know, I mean, this is when you learn about integrity and you learn about honesty. At Harvard a couple years ago, over 130 undergrads were suspended because they were caught in a cheating scandal involving a take-home test. So you want to practice integrity and honesty. It's something that'll help you sleep well and it'll make a difference throughout your life. And then work ethic, I think most of you got pretty skilled at that whole area here, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about more the academic side of things and how to make that work. How do we measure academic success anyway? What's the measurement? GPA, those 3 magic letters. And my first suggestion to you is make sure that you have a specific target for your GPA this year. Now, I'm not necessarily saying a 4.0. In fact, in general, targeting a 4.0 is not a particularly good idea. Because to get a 4.0 means that you exclude everything else from your life. And good graduate schools and good employers do not want a one-dimensional candidate. They want somebody that's got a lot more going for them. But there are some fields and some graduate schools where your GPA has to be above a certain level or they won't even look at you. So get a good, solid target. What did you all learn about having specific goals this summer? Were they helpful on a daily basis?
Yeah.
How about goal periods?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine if you started a morning on the book field and you said, okay, here we go. I'm going to work as hard as I can, as long as I can, and show the books as many times as I can. How in the world do you measure that on an hour-by-hour basis, right? So having very targeted goals. The other thing that goals do is they give you a lot more energy than if you have no goals. Anybody, for example, looking forward to getting back and playing some sports? Okay, what are some things? What are you looking forward to playing?
I play soccer.
You play soccer, okay. So let's say you divide up and you get some team and you're out there, you're ready to just rock and roll after your summer. So you got a breakaway, you're leading, you're moving it down the field and you get ready to launch it and you realize somebody has stolen the net. So the other team gets the ball, they're going the other way, they're getting ready to knock it in there, and there's no net there either. So how much fun is soccer with no goals at the end? Oh, well, I guess we'll just kick the ball around and sing Kumbaya. You know, that'd be kind of fun. You know, we get excited in sports about the idea of a specific goal, and it gives us energy. The same is true with your academics, because you can track it and you can measure it and you can kind of figure out what's going on. Now, there's something that every human in the world has the same amount of. And nobody has more and nobody has less. Anybody know what I'm talking about? The same amount of time. In every week, each individual has 168 hours. You don't get any more, but fortunately you don't get any less. Have you ever used this phrase? Man, I ran out of time. No, you didn't. You had it all. Or I wish I had more time. I've used that phrase. Well, sorry, can't get any. You've got it all. But here's what's incredible about time. Every human's got the same amount. But some people change the course of history. And most people, you don't even know they were in history. So I want to challenge you with year 168 to be a meaningful specific and not a wandering generality. Use your time so that it really amounts to something. I used to study this stuff, so I would take a time management class, and then I'd buy books on time management. And I got so frustrated because every time I tried to manage time, it refused to be managed. I would grip my watch really hard, and my watch would still tick along at 60 seconds a minute. And then it'd be 60 minutes in every hour, no matter how I tried to manage it. And eventually there were 575,600 minutes in a year, and I couldn't hang on to that either. And then I met some guys from Texas, and they said, well, here's how we manage time. They get a 12 gauge to the clock. But what you suddenly realize is you can't manage time. But one thing you can figure out is how to manage yourself. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here today as we go through some really cool things. Is it okay if I try to sell you an idea?
Yeah.
Okay, so go Mrs. Jones on me, get real close-minded. Okay, there we go. So to sell an idea, you always start with a good intro. So here comes my intro. What if I could tell you about something really simple in which you would get all A's and B's, you'd have all your evenings free, and you'd have all your weekends free? Would that be something you could decide on without stepping on your husband's toes? All right, well, let me share it with you. This immensely sophisticated computer graphic is the whole key. This represents a week. And the period in red, how would you describe that in words? No, describe it in words.
Right.
It's a certain 8 to 5, which days?
Monday through Friday.
8 to 5, Monday through Friday, which sounds suspiciously like a
Job.
job. Now here's how this is going to work. I believe in being really, really simple. So during the red zone, allow your body to be in exactly one of two places, and that's all. One place you can be is in class. Ideally, one you've registered to take. I know the one down the hall is a lot more interesting, but I'm talking about the one you're registered to take. And the second place you can allow yourself to be is in a quiet place of study, actually studying. And that's literally it. And you will get best grades of your life and have more free time than you've ever had. Now I see great disbelief on many of your faces, so let me try to explain why this works. Years ago when I was a student manager, somebody said, I know you want to be successful, Dan, so here's a really easy formula. Study unsuccessful people and do the opposite. That sounds okay to me. So let's analyze the typical college student. Let's say your first class is at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning, right? When does the typical college student get out of bed? Okay. One person was honest. It was 10 first came out of their mouth. A lot of 9+, 9:59, etc. But the reality is when you get up for your 10 o'clock class is a very complex decision based on several mighty important factors. Well, Dan, it's hard. Number one, is this a class I can't afford to miss? Again. Is there somebody that I know that can take reliable notes? Better yet, are the notes online? Better yet, is the whole lecture on video where I can watch it later? And if the weather's bad, all bets are off. You know, so let's say that somebody does decide to show up for their 10 o'clock. What quality breakfast do they have? Not much. I'd say, well, here's some Cheetos. There's some beer left in this can. All right, got my breakfast. I'm going to go to sit in my class. And they sit there from 10 to 11, and the class is over, and the next class is not till 3. So what does the average student do from 11 to 3? Netflix, sleep. They resume the sleep that was so rudely interrupted by their pursuit of an education. And they don't necessarily go home. They often go to the union. Do they have kind of plush chairs in your student unions? Some really comfortable couches and stuff. So they get into one of those plush chairs and they start sinking. And they start sinking. And they keep sinking until everyone around them is speaking Mandarin. You know, it's like, man, I've sunk a long way in here. Then they wake up for their 3 o'clock and it's over and they waste time in the evening. And finally around 6 o'clock or so, you start seeing great herds of beings moving toward feeding places. Eat, time to eat. And over dinner, the number one topic of conversation is how much studying we all have to do. And they'll spend about an hour and a half talking about how much studying everybody has to do. Then you start migrating to try to study. You see an open door. Whoa, Halo 4. I got to go in there and level up. And that's the girls. The guys are busy updating their Pinterest, making sure that everything is nice and neat. And then you realize, man, I'm way off schedule. I haven't tweeted all day long. I got to get some Snapchat going. My Instagram's way behind. I got to get my profile set up. Got a new picture and page. Got to check out the latest YouTube stuff. Then maybe around 11 at night, open up a textbook, start studying. And after 10 or 12 minutes, it's like, man, I'm exhausted, and I've been studying all night. What happens when midterms get close? Panic time. No, there's no time to brew any coffee. Give me a can and a spoon. I'm just going to eat it by the mouthful, man. I got to stay awake. Cram through midterms, then sleep 57 hours, then wake up, wash, rinse, repeat. So does this story sound roughly true for some people? Nobody in this room, of course. Well, let me introduce you to your brand bold new world. Because your first class is at 10, but you've committed to be either in class or quiet place of study, where are you going to be at 8? Quiet place of study. Get a proper breakfast. And here's what I also want to recommend is that you pack a lunch before you go to so you don't waste time and money going for lunch. Have you ever packed a lunch before? Yeah. Okay, my only suggestion is no peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in between summers. Every time you see a PBJ, you'll have PTSD. So just focus on something a little bit different than peanut butter and jelly. Now, if you show up in the library at 8 o'clock in the morning, how many other people are in there? You can claim a whole table, and if not the table, the whole floor, because there's nobody there. Now, here's a really weird thing. What if from 8 to 10, you studied for your 10 o'clock class? Where would your brain be when the class came around? You'd be in the subject, wouldn't you? And so the lecture would mean a lot more to you. Professor gives you an assignment, right? Okay, homework due Wednesday. So when does the average student start their Wednesday homework? Overachievers start Tuesday night, and a lot of others start Wednesday morning. Here's the problem with that. If you take notes or you hear a lecture and you don't look at your notes or review it for a day and a half, you will remember approximately 10% of the material, which means you've forgotten 90%. You ever pick up your notes a couple days after you took them and you go, who took these? Certainly not me. What class was this? Is that my class? Because our brains just forget stuff. So wouldn't it be a different universe if you started your homework within 5 minutes of the time it was assigned? Ooh. Most homework assignments take the current lecture and are abridged to the next lecture. So because you just came from the lecture, you're sitting down, you start the homework, it's actually going to mean more to you. It will be a little bit easier to understand. The easier it is to understand, the more engaging it becomes. The more engaging it is, the more you like it, the more hard you work. It cycles upward in a really positive way. Have a quick lunch, then about 1 o'clock, shift gears, start studying for your 3 o'clock class. So your head is totally in that gear. Keep this thing going until 5. And if you'll do this for 2 or 3 weeks, I've got a prediction I'd make. You're going to discover that this is too much time. You will be so current in everything. You'll check your to-do list, tick, 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 every box is ticked. And you'll say, but dude, I still got 6 hours in the library and I'm current. Well, that means you get to do odd things, like read the suggested optional readings that no one ever reads, work the additional problem sets that nobody ever does. And I'll tell you in a minute how that will come back to really, really help you in a cool way. And the most fun part about this whole thing is what's your feeling of pressure academically when you're caught up? None. So what is your good times and party life like when you don't feel guilt about you really ought to be studying? I'd say it's kind of amped up, isn't it? So my recommendation is from 5 o'clock on, form the habit of tormenting people. Tormenting people. Here's a little tip on how you can build this mystique about yourself where nobody will really understand why you're so awesome. You're all current, so start walking around and saying, hey, heard there's this new band, you want to go check? Oh, sorry, dude, you got to study. I forgot. Hey, man, you want to go check out this new coffee? Oh, you got midterms? Oh, I'm totally sorry. Hey, man, there's these 2 girls who want to go dancing. Oh, you got to study? I'll dance with both of them. And what'll happen is people start talking about you and say, you know that dude? You know, he gets all A's and B's, and he's always partying, and he never studies. No one's ever seen him study. Now, why are there no witnesses to the crime of studying? Because he's studying when they are asleep, right? So there's no witnesses. It's how you build this mystique that you're a pretty awesome person. Now, what some of you may be thinking is, oh, it all sounds so ideal, Dan, but I have this part-time job, or my major's more demanding, or all this stuff, right? I kind of get that stuff. Thank goodness your situations are all different. It means you're all unique people. If your situation's different and you've got midday obligations, I get that. So don't just adopt this, adapt this. Make it fit your deal. For example, I always worked part-time. Even though I sold a ton of books, Harvard was like a bottomless pit. I'd give them all my money and they would say, more. You know, it's just how it would work. So I always had a part-time job, and sometimes it was in the middle of the day. That's just part of life. So learn to adjust. But here's the point. If this is your baseline and you work around this, aren't you better off than the average student? Because the average student basically gets up and says, what do I feel like doing today? And the answer is usually, not much. So let this, the lessons of the summer is the structure of a schedule is what gives you freedom. So let this work for you. I wanted to recruit a team. And as I thought about it, I thought, you know, I'm going to probably learn more from team building, or at least as much as any of my classes. So I decided to pretend that recruiting was like another class. I built it into my schedule. I put time in. So when my DSM was on campus, I didn't feel guilty about it. I went to that like it was a class, and I learned an awful lot from him, and it was super helpful. Is this making sense so far? Okay. Now, here's an important concept. Anybody excited about catching up on a little bit of sleep? Oh, yeah. In fact, some of the more analytical people in this room, as they were doing their book count, they were also calculating their lost hours of sleep. And they said, okay, I've got my goals crystallized now, got them by goal periods. If I just sleep 18 hours a night, then by October 9th, I'll be current. Hey, listen, I fully believe that as a student, you need more sleep than you do on the book field. Because the book field, every 20, 30 minutes or so, you're up and moving. You're running around a lot, you're outdoors. But in classes, you're in this climate-controlled situation. And do any of you have 90-minute lectures sometimes, or 2-hour lectures? Those are brutal. Because about 20 minutes, you start getting the happy feet and you want to start moving. But, oh shoot, I got an hour and a half still. And if you're not rested, you're going to start having what we call note-taking whiplash injuries. That's right. Probably seen people doing that in a lot of classes, right? How many hours of sleep are you supposed to get? They recommend 8 hours of sleep typically. And in my experience of 4 decades of watching college students pretty up close, I've concluded that most students do get an average of 8 hours of sleep a night. An average. They get 2 hours one night and 14 hours the next night, and they're averaging 8. It's just a little inconsistent in how that happens in between times, right? So I had an old buddy named Tom McAuliffe, and he said, Dan, here's the key to getting enough rest. Form the habit of going to bed today and waking up tomorrow. I said, what'd you say? He said, go to bed today and wake up tomorrow. He said, most college students go to bed tomorrow and wake up tomorrow. Ah, I get it. Midnight's important. So somewhere left at midnight would be a good idea to go to sleep, at least Sunday through Thursday nights, right? And then get up in the morning with a little bit more refreshed attitude. Form good sleep habits. It will help you throughout your life and prevent you from having a lot of problems. And we talked about quiet place to study. Okay? How many of you study where you live? Anybody? Okay, not too often. How many of you study elsewhere? How many like to have fun where you live? Chill out, relax? Okay, good. Most of you have got the principle down then. If you study where you live and you like to have fun where you live, do you realize what a conflict you place your poor brain into whenever you walk into your room? You walk in and your brain says, ah, my room, a hallowed place of academic excellence. And a microsecond later it says, ah, my crib where I hang. Which one wins every time? Crib. You intend to study, but you have 1,000 more pleasant options all right there next to you. So I believe in separation of church and state. Let your room be where you chill, relax, have fun, read for pleasure, play music, enjoy just good times, and find you a deathly boring place to study where there are 0 distractions. And you might have to look a little bit. Your library may be perfect. I know at Harvard when I was there, the undergraduate library was a social center of the campus, so it was really loud. And the huge library, the main one, which was 10 stories tall, was haunted. I saw 2 trolls in there once, I'm not kidding. And so I said, this is dangerous. So one day I was walking on the campus and I saw this little sign in the grass that said Geology Library, and it pointed down a stairway. Now, I didn't even know there was a geology library, and even geology majors that were my buddies didn't know there was a geology library. So I stepped down into the geology library and decided it was perfect. There were no humans at all in there. as far as I could tell, nobody was even employed to work in there. And it was all about geology. I was a political science major, right? One time I wanted to get off track. I wanted to get negative. So I said, I'm going to just go read a magazine. I'm not going to study. So I grabbed a magazine. Earthquake Monthly. Are P waves real? Oh, well, I guess I'll go back to my poli-sci. Pick a deadly boring place. Now, there was a dinosaur skeleton in there and a human skull. So I put some hair on the skull and called him Wilson, Wilson. Got kind of excited, but got a lot done in that geology library. It was way cool. Making sense? So make these things work. Now, here's a couple of quick tips. One, the 2-minute drill. Now, the ex-football players in here know of a certain kind of 2-minute drill. That's not what I'm talking about. If class starts at 10, when does the average student in their chair ready to pay attention? 10:00 something, right? Usually not right at 10. So I want to make a suggestion. Show up to your classes about 2 minutes early. It's important so that you can scope out your seat, for one thing. Best seat, I think, in the house is probably not even necessarily right up here in front, but you're in one of the best seats in the house. And the one right next to you is one of the best seats in the house. That's one of the best seats in the house. Don't make the mistake of sitting way in the back where all the cool people sit, because they get the bad jobs later because they don't know what they're doing. So you want to sit up close, you can see and you can hear well, and most important, you can catch your professor's eye. For the 2 minutes before class, quickly try to study up what you think is going to be the first thing out of his or her mouth. Because if you can guess what your professor says first, you are in sync. You know exactly what's going on. So you're sitting there. Here's how I recommend you take notes. Now, the reason this is so important is because, first of all, most students are not taking notes. Most students are playing video games. They're doing all kinds of weird stuff. They're maybe texting. You know, they're not really taking much attention. And you're there, you're taking all these notes, and you're making all this kind of thing happen. Does a professor ever say, are there any questions? Yep. And what do you think is the #1 most commonly asked question in every college campus? Yeah. Is this going to be on the test? Showing a great depth of academic curiosity, right? But remember your plan. You've been in the library, you've been studying, you know your stuff. Just let your hand kind of snake up in the air. And when he says, yes, you have a question? And say, yes, professor, I was just wondering, in optional reading #3, and just let that hang for a couple seconds, if you agree with Hammerstein's point of view, or if you think in suggested monograph #5, Merkowitz was better. Now, 2 things will happen. #1, the rest of the class will quit. Game over. We lose. He did the optional readings? What? And second, you may see your professor start to do a little tap dancing, like, whoa, optional reading 3. Well, actually, it's been some time since I read optional 3. I'll have to review and get back to you on that. But either way, you've established yourself as a player. And it makes a huge difference if the professor sees you're paying attention. Is that cool? Now, the reason that this is such an important thing is because you got to understand where your profs are coming from. You've been busy all summer, so you probably don't know the latest genealogical study that was done. Did you hear about it? You didn't? Well, they did a study of college professors, and they found that more than 90% of them had 2 human parents, leading researchers to conclude that most college professors are themselves human, which means they have human emotions and human reactions and human issues, right? So let's suppose that next week, do you think your professors are going to leap out of bed at 5:59, snap out 40 quick push-ups, run over to the mirror and say, you good-looking academic, don't you ever die. This semester you're going to have 150 young minds in your class, minds that you can shape and form and lead to new levels of intellectual inquiry, take them to new heights of epistemological excellence, and you can do it, dude. Go teach. Probably not so much. More likely they'll hit the snooze alarm 2 or 3 times and roll over and look at the ceiling and start thinking, here we go again. 7th year of trying to qualify for tenure. Still paying on my graduate school student loans. And probably have 150 or so kids this semester, 30 of whom I'll never even see. They just won't even show up. Another 30, I'll only see the tops of their heads because they'll sit down, fold their arms, and go right to sleep. Several will be proficient at exchanging YouTube and SportsCenter news with each other. And there may be a couple taking notes, and there'll be a small but noticeable percentage looking at me with thinly veiled homicidal intent. Let's go teach. Now they walk into their classroom. Is typically the front row occupied like this one is? Interestingly enough, it usually is not. And if the room is big enough, normally the second row has no one in it either. So from the professor's point of view, what nonverbal message are you sending if there's no one in the front row and no one in the second row? We don't want to be here. We don't want you to be here. Don't get too close. Keep your distance, and nobody will get hurt. It's a very unwelcoming environment. That's why I recommend you sit first row or second row so that there's a little bit more of a welcome there. Understand where your professors are coming from. And if you're prepared and you contribute and you volunteer and you take the initiative a little bit, you're going to start winning some points without anything else going on in your life. Now, another thing about professors, do they have something called office hours still these days? Okay, in which the professors are supposed to be in their office. So we talked about average students. When does the average student go to office hours, if at all? What time in the semester? End of the semester.
When they need help on a grade, they can help some.
Perfect. When they're in trouble and they need help. And the students walk in at the end of the semester with prayer and supplication. And at that time of the semester, the professor's lounging on kind of a couch, wearing a Roman toga, sipping wine and eating grapes, and just waiting to hear your sob story. And you lay it all out and they say, has this person contributed? Have they really been engaged? Have they done their very best? Do I even know who the heck they are? And they kind of have some fun with that. So let's put it on its ear. I urge you to go see your professors the first week of class. As soon as your schedule is set, go by their office hours, knock on the door. They'll probably be in there doing very little. And they'll look up and say, can I help you? And smile and say, don't worry, I'm not selling anything. You've waited 3 months to say that. I'm not selling anything. And they'll say, well, come in. And then you introduce yourself, shake their hand, and say, well, my name's Dan Moore. I'm enrolled in your class this semester. And I wonder if I could get your advice. Yeah? Well, I'm thinking about going to law school. I'm going to be a junior. I'm not really sure, though. And I was wondering if you could give me 2 or 3 tips that would help me get the most out of your class. If you could give me 2 or 3 tips that would help me get the most out of your class. Now, how frequently do you think they are asked that? They're not. And don't be surprised if the professor tears up just a little and says, really? Oh my goodness, sorry. But they told me in grad school I might meet you someday. And here you are. Let's talk. And you're going to discover that these professors are several things. They're brilliant. They're brilliant. I mean, they didn't get to be a college professor because they fell off a turnip truck and they were too dumb to be a jailer. They are brilliant. They have incredible senses of humor, most of them. They have experiences worldwide, anecdotes and stories that'll blow your mind. Just a lot of them are shy in front of groups. And so lecturing is not their long suit. And people say, oh, she's boring. But you get to know them. They're awesome people. And I recommend you get to know them, drop them a little thank you note after the meeting, and then do all the other things I talked about. Be prepared for class, take the initiative, do this and that. If you get in trouble later in the semester, would that come to your aid if you needed some help? Yes, because everybody wants to help the person that's willing to help themselves. But here's another reason you need to get to know a couple of your professors pretty well. How many of you are thinking you might go to graduate school someday? Okay. What's one thing you need in your application? Recommendation letters. So what do you want the letters to say? To whom it may concern, according to the registrar, student 54321 was in my class. I believe he passed. Rubber stamp. Or do you want the letter to say, it is a distinct pleasure to write the letter of recommendation regarding, and your name is there, and they go into detail about how prepared you were, how you contributed to class discussions, you were a leader in the class, you asked intelligent questions, you kept the professor on his toes, I'll tell you that much. And if you need more information, here's my cell phone, call me direct. That will have immense power compared to this generic, yes, he was in my class, yes, he passed. So get to know your profs, be a part of the solution there, and that can help you massively, which is really cool. I recommend that you use what you're paying for. You've got lots of facilities on your campus, and your tuition is paying for all of them. Use your rec center. You know, there are awesome rec centers at every one of your schools. Use the health services. Go to your career center. Big, big, bold point I want to make here. Go to your career center. How many of you have been to the Career Center in your campus, got to know anybody there? Some of you done that? Who's not done that yet? Okay. And who never raises their hand no matter what the question is? Okay, very cool. Most of you have gone by, go by and see them again, and walk in and say, I know I don't know what I want to do yet for a living, but I want to just update my file. Let me tell you about my summer. Meet with one of the counselors so they keep your file growing. We meet with lots of career directors. Their biggest complaint are students that come in after they've graduated or a week before they graduate and say, okay, about done, got my job lined up. Who are you? I don't know anything about them. So use your facilities, right? If you need tutoring, you probably can get some great tutors, which will be a lot of help. I recommend also highly that you use constructive self-talk. Anybody learned that that was important in the summer? It's going to be more important in college, believe it or not, because you're not going to have a positive HQ in general. You probably won't have conference calls. You're not going to have Sunday meetings. You're not going to have nightly stat calls. So you're going to have to be in charge of your own self-motivation. And although many people think Mr. Mediocrity was created on the book field, we all know that he was cloned in a bio lab on a college campus. And Mr. Mediocrity has been waiting all summer to jump back in your ear and deal with you. So constructive self-talk. Now, first of all, we need to remind ourselves what self-talk is not. It's not about going to a mirror and saying soulfully into the mirror, I'm a tiger. I'm a tiger. Arr. You don't want to do that, because if you do too much of that, something horrible could come out of that mirror. And you don't actually want this horrible thing coming out of that mirror. You know, it's a little bit of a problem there. So, woo, we better get that out of there. Mario's enjoying that one. Somebody once said, so what's Dan Moore's speaking style like? And the other guy said, well, it's kind of like the cross-eyed javelin thrower. Didn't win any medals, but kept the crowd wide awake. You all needed that one, didn't you? All right, so self-talk is no more than just the voice of reason in your head that says, you know, you really ought to just go study and listen to it once in a while and actually do go study. And then let the rest of the world pull you astray once in a while, which is fine. So use good self-talk. I also recommend that you watch who you hang out with. It's a really strange phenomenon, but we become like the people we associate with. So if you want to get better grades, who should you hang out with? People who care about their grades. If you hang around with enough people that say, I'm just going to blow off this class, forget this one, this is a waste of time, it becomes very contagious. And I made a mistake as a freshman in the first half of my sophomore year listening to people like that. I had a lot of recreation, but I sure didn't get what I should have gotten out of my first part of my college experience. So hang out with people that care. It's okay if you have two sets of friends list. You have your party friend list and you have your let's get serious about life list. But those people will help bring out the best in you. And what if you get seriously behind? You get kind of in a hole. Does anybody know what the first rule of survival is when you find you're in a hole? Yes, sir. Stop digging. Stop digging. Sometimes students get through midterms and they're way behind and they go, oh, wow, I'm so far off track. Party! And they party the rest of the semester and it just gets worse. Call a halt. Put extra hours, get you some tutoring, go talk to your professors more. Anybody here kind of pull their summer out of a hole in the last half? Sure you did. You know you can do that. So if you get in a hole, have the faith that you can pull that out. So here's a big important question. Who is responsible for your success in college? Very good. So everybody hold up your right hand and repeat after me. I and I alone am responsible for my success in college. So help me, Aristophanes. All right, very cool. Without realizing it, you just gained enormous power. Because the person that says, I and I alone am responsible, wastes zero energy making excuses. They waste zero energy blaming anybody else. And it's so easy to blame others. So I encourage you throughout life to take that, I and I alone am responsible. And when you do, it makes a huge difference. Second suggestion, who can be your accountability partners? Who do you know that cares enough about their grades and cares enough about your success that they're willing to call you out if you sometimes aren't doing what you should do? In my case, I owe a lot of my diploma to another bookman named Ben Davis. Ben was an early riser. I was not by nature. And so we made a pact. If ever I was not up on time, he would call my roommate, who was big and ugly and hated Southwestern. Now, when my roommate was awakened once by Ben saying, would you mind waking Dan up? Oh, it was a really interesting conversation I had with my negative roommate. I never overslept again. So you find somebody that cares enough about you, help hold you accountable, and make that work for you. These are wonderful years. They're brilliant years. Enjoy them, max them out. Get good grades, get involved with activities, build a great team, have a ton of fun. What I've just shared with you, I heard after my first summer, and unfortunately I practiced about 5% of it. Heard it again after my second summer, and I applied about 80 to 90% of it. And I not only got my best grades that I got, but was able to graduate with honors. I recruited a 6-person team as a full-time student. I was the org leader on campus with Southwestern. I was secretary of the university choir. I headed up the Model United Nations program that they put on campus. Wrote my senior honors thesis. I had a girlfriend, and I played lead guitar in a rock band. I had a ton of fun and had the same amount of time I'd ever had. It was just a matter of applying what I had been taught. So I'm so grateful for you, and I challenge you to make this a fantastic semester and a fantastic year. You don't even know how great you all are, but I think I do. Thanks for everything you've done, and we'll see you in January, if not sooner. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.